Chapter 49, War's End. In Europe in 1918, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, it suddenly became quiet. The cannons were still. For the first time since 1914, men could hear each other without shouting. The Great War, soon to be known as World War I, was over. It had been a horrible war. 9 million men died. It was not fought soldier against soldier like medieval battles of knights in armor. The new weapons of killing, machine guns, tanks, long-range artillery, grenades, and poison gas, led to mass slaughter. War, wrote one soldier, is nothing but murder. But now the guns were silent. The dying was finished. Take a quick look over here. It says no one could buy his way out of service in World War I, unlike the Civil War, and for the first time women served officially in the armed forces. But now the guns were silent, the dying was finished. In Washington, D.C., even though it was 6 o'clock in the morning, America's 28th President, Woodrow Wilson, was up at his desk. Because he was considerate and feared his clackety typewriter would wake his wife and staff, he sat and wrote these words with a pen on White House stationery. Everything for which America has fought has been accomplished. It will now be our fortunate duty to assist by example, by sober friendly counsel, and by material aid, in the establishment of just democracy throughout the world. They were the words of a high-minded leader. The slim, frail, bookish man had proved to be a great war president. In amazingly fast order, he had turned a peaceful nation into a strong fighting force. The country's factories had gone from making corsets, bicycles, and brooms to production of guns, ships, and uniforms. In just over a year, beginning in April 1917, more than 1 million American men had been drafted into the Army, trained, and sent overseas. And just in time. In Europe, the fighting had been going on for 3 years. Both sides were near collapse. The Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Turkish Ottoman Empire, were on one side, against the Allies, Britain, France, Russia, Japan, and Italy, with a few other nations involved too. The war, awful, dreary, bloody, had begun in Europe for selfish reasons. I'm going to pause before I go on to the next page. Take a look at this timeline over here on the screen. If you want to pause the video, you can just read through that silently to yourself. This just shows each year in the war and what happened. Down below, let's read this insert about Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson's greatest strength was his integrity. People trusted him because they knew he was trustworthy. He inspired others. He believed in the American dream. In Jefferson's words about how all people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Wilson wanted to see that dream spread around the world. He convinced people of the United States to go to war without thought of gain for themselves. He made it clear to everyone that America's only goal was to make the world safe for democracy. He made America's participation in the war seem noble and unselfish. Let's continue reading up here. It ended up making nations and people cruel and bitter and angry, and it led to another terrible war. On November 11, 1918, it was still dark, but the news of war's end was too good to wait for daybreak. Whistles tooted, church bells rang, and sirens blared. Before long, the streets across the nation were filled with people cheering, shouting, hugging, and kissing. America had gone to war, and the world was going to be a better place because of it. Or so it seemed on that Armistice Day. An armistice is a truce that brings an end to fighting before the official signing of a peace treaty.